All right, Nico, can you say, welcome to another episode of Healthy Births, Happy Babies?
It's a happy episode. Happy babies.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Healthy Births, Happy Babies. I'm Dr. Jay Warren. I'm the host of this podcast, and I want to take a moment before we get into the episode to thank all of you listeners. Look at this. There are over 100 episodes. It's been over 2 years that I've been doing this podcast. Had amazing guests on. Gotten great feedback from you to be able to make this podcast even better with bringing on new guests and making sure I find all the topics that you're interested in are covered. And I just want to thank all of you for your feedback, in your ratings and reviews in iTunes, for the emails that I get. And it just really helps because this podcasting environment's really important to me. It's really fun. I love doing it. But it's also great to hear that it's making a difference and that you're taking this information and getting value out of it. So thank you for listening and for your support. And on today's episode, I'm going to be talking with you about prenatal bonding. And this is something that if you've been listening to the podcast for a while now, you'll have heard that I've come out with my own online program around this subject. It's called Connecting with Baby During Pregnancy. And it's really a culmination of everything I've learned in the last couple of years since I first started learning about it and how important it can be and what a difference it can make. So I'm going to be talking with you about a lot of the information that I've come across. I was invited to speak last month at the time of this recording. It was last month in Washington, D.C. at a national conference to a room full of doctors that are all prenatal and pediatric chiropractors like myself. There was over 700 people in the room. And I was talking about this very subject, and I'm not going to be delivering that talk to you because that was to a room full of docs, but I want to gear it towards you, the pregnant woman, and to teach you about these techniques and, how you can start doing them during your pregnancy. I'll tell you more about how I came across it and go into a lot of studies and everything, but I want to start off right from the beginning talking about the Raffai Study. Now, the Raffai Study is a study that was done in Austria. It had over 6,000 pregnant women in it, and each of them were taught these prenatal bonding techniques. The techniques that I've put together in my program, and I'll be talking about later on in the episode, were taught to these women. They did it all throughout their pregnancy, and these are the results that these women got. They had less anxiety and pain during labor and required less effort giving birth. They had less need for obstetrical interventions with fewer complications and C-sections. And then after the birth, their baby slept longer and deeper at night with fewer awakenings, which means moms got better sleep as well. And what they say is excessive infant crying was virtually unknown. And get this last one is amazing. Postpartum depression was less than 1% in the prenatal bonding mothers. Now, national and worldwide stats on postpartum depression, not baby blues, but full-blown postpartum depression, looks at like 19% is some of the averages I've looked at. So with these women doing these daily processes, just minutes a day, virtually eliminating postpartum depression is amazing. And that's just talking about that aspect. We're looking at all these things that like labor was easier, less interventions, less C-sections, babies are calmer on the other side, moms are able to soothe better, crying is decreased, sleep is better. I mean, those are all things that I know every mom wants. So these techniques that I've now learned so much more about it are actually something that I, as a dad, started doing when I was getting ready for Nico to come into the world, my son. And it came about in kind of a backwards way and kind of maybe an embarrassing way. I didn't know anything about prenatal bonding as a technique. It was just something that I started doing because Effie was really uncomfortable during her pregnancy, and it became more and more uncomfortable, and her sleep was more and more interrupted. And soon I found myself sleeping in the guest room. And that's something I was kind of embarrassed to talk about at first because I just didn't feel great about it. But the more I've shared this story, the more I realize that's not that uncommon for partners to be in the guest room during pregnancy, because I absolutely wanted her sleeping well. I know how important it is. I wanted her to be comfortable. And if that meant me being elsewhere, I wanted that for her and for the pregnancy. But, to be honest, I felt disconnected. I didn't like it, but I was doing it. But I felt disconnected not only from her because we weren't sharing the same bed, but I also felt disconnected from my son. And so what I found myself doing as I was falling asleep was reaching out to him. I'd say hi and have little conversations with him. Just saying how much I loved him and how excited I was to be his dad, and thank you for choosing me as your dad, and we're going to have this great adventure together, and I'm so excited to meet you. And it just really made me feel better, and it was just something I was doing as my own practice. And then fast forward into this whole world that I'm in now, with prenatal and pediatric chiropractic, as well as this podcast and interviewing tons of people, I learned that that's actually called prenatal bonding and it's actually a thing. And it was actually through a podcast interview. I was interviewing Anna Verwal. I was introduced to her through a number of people in the birth community. And we had a conversation around birth imprints and the effect that the prenatal environment has, not just on the epigenetic influence as far as physical health, but it also imprints and shapes your baby's psychological health. This is episode 29, again with Anna Verwal, and I was fascinated by this subject. I'd heard things about it before. She has an amazing TED Talk that I'd seen, I think, during the pregnancy, getting ready for Nico to come in. But I didn't know that much about it, but it was that conversation, that interview, that I continued the conversation with her afterwards. I'd email her questions and how about this and what about this? And she turned me on to learn more about it through the association called APPPAH. Now, APPPAH is the Association of Pre and Perinatal Psychology and Health. And it's an association that's put together by, at first, it was psychiatrists and psychologists only that were delving into this world around how the prenatal environment shapes the psychology, the personality of the baby in the womb, and then with the birth, that can imprint on them as well as far as them making decisions about how the world is. And I'm going to be talking a lot about that in just a little bit. But now it's an association that's been around for 30 years. I'm in their training program learning so much from these doctors as well as tons of other birth workers that understand how important that first environment, the first world that the baby's being grown in is inside your womb, and how important it is for moms to recognize that. And there's a great quote by Dr. David Chamberlain. He's one of the founders, the co-founders of APPPAH, that says what is currently referred to as early parenting begins at birth and is at least 9 months too late, meaning that, parents are encouraged and sometimes pride themselves as they're parenting early, meaning when we have a newborn, but really it should start at conception. And that bonding and that parenting really starts right away. And understanding these principles can lead to just what we talked about in the Raffai study of how the baby can be grown and developed or marinated, if you will, in a loving, connected environment because mom and hopefully dad too, I'm going to talk about the dads, are connecting and acknowledging the baby. And this is something that's really important in the APPPAH world and is for all parents to understand. And the research is absolutely there that your baby right now in your womb is conscious. Your baby's having an experience right now, and that experience is of the world is inside your body. You're creating their world inside your womb. They're listening to you and they're learning. And so that begs the question of, if you are pregnant right now, what are you saying to your baby? And what are you teaching them? And through a number of these studies that I'm going to be talking about, it shows that babies are learning in utero. They have memories that are being formed there. And in an epigenetic sense, the experience that they're having is shaping their physiological development as well as their brain development. Embryologically, I'm not going to go through all the different things about the week by week of the embryology of things, but suffice it to say, by the end of the first trimester, and certainly by the beginning of the second trimester, all 5 senses of your baby are booted up and working. They're sight-wise, their eyes might not be open, they're in a dark environment, but if you shine a light on a pregnant woman's baby, their baby will react and turn away from that bright light. So it's showing that those visual centers are booted up and that the eyes are actually working. There's no direct evidence that a baby's smelling and tasting in utero, but there have been indications that if a mom smokes or has alcohol, or there's certain types of foods, that the amniotic fluid reflects those chemical changes, and that's going into the baby's mouth, and taste receptors are firing in the brain, as well as smelling receptors, olfactory centers in the brain light up in utero as well. So those senses are there. Touch, absolutely. We know that when a baby is subjected to an amniocentesis, that needle going in, if that needle pricks the baby, they definitely react in pain. And even radiologists that are doing amnios will notice there's like the shy effect, and that if the needle's going in, baby will turn away from it. Even if the baby hasn't been pricked by the needle, they'll show a adverse reaction to that needle going in. So we know that sensory-wise, baby is booted up and sensing the environment in a touch sense. But what we're going to be talking about the most is that fifth sense of the baby, and that's hearing. And hearing, the inner ear might not be fully developed by the end of this first trimester, but the brain centers of hearing, the auditory centers, are absolutely functioning already even before the inner ear is formed. And in the second trimester, baby is definitely reactive to sound. And there's lots of studies showing that moms or babies will react to mom's voice, specifically to mom's voice. They recognize that voice more than any other voice, which makes sense because as you're talking, that voice, obviously baby's hearing every single word you say out loud because baby's with you each and every moment, but also they're hearing it even louder and getting even more of an experience of your voice than any other because it's reverberating through your body as far as bone conduction and through the fluids of your body. That resonance in the torso goes into the uterus and is that much louder and much more, baby's much more attuned to it. So when babies come through, they absolutely recognize mom's voice right away. And the second most common voice that they're going to recognize or know is dad's voice. Hopefully dad's voice is the second most heard voice that they have, aside from other family members that might be in the house as well. So we really want dads engaging in the same way that I was with my son, engaging and talking with baby and doing these processes that I'll share with you in a little bit. So that's how we know embryologically that the baby's senses are fully functioning. And we also know through some learning studies that the baby's forming memories. And the most famous one of these, and the cutest one, I think, is the Cat in the Hat study or the Dr. Seuss study. And what they did with some women is they had some women during their second trimester reading the book Cat in the Hat by Dr. Seuss each and every day out loud to their babies. And either at the 32nd week or the 34th week, I can't remember, they had the mom stop. And after the birth, the psychologists designed a study where they had mom read Cat in the Hat and measure the baby's reactivity to see if baby recognized that. And they absolutely did, more so than mom reading other books or saying other words. So I'm not exactly sure how they designed that study to determine whether or not baby could recognize it or not, but the design of it was sound, and babies recognized that book, which was read 2 months before they were even born, if it was at the 32, 34 week mark, from mom's voice. So that shows memories are being formed in that second trimester. And so the more we can create a relaxing environment, a nurturing environment, and an acknowledging environment, that meaning you as mom, and dad too, you as mom acknowledging baby's consciousness, that they're having an experience, you're carrying them throughout your day, going to work, going to the store, having conversations with your friends and family, all of those things your baby is experiencing. And your perception of all of those things, meaning your reaction to those things, whether they're stressful, whether they're relaxing, whether they're happy things, or whether they're sad, are shaping the baby's shaping your baby as far as their physiology as well as their psychology. I'll start with the physiology first, and that is basically the whole field of epigenetics. I had a conversation with Dr. Bruce Lipton, who's really a leader in epigenetics and showing how pregnancy influences your child's genes. That podcast episode interview was podcast number 49, so definitely listen to that one if you haven't. Dr. Lipton's, that first one that we did, is the number one most downloaded episode of my podcast. It was an amazing conversation, and basically explained how your internal environment is the baby's external environment, and it's the external environment that turns our genes on and off. It's not just that you have hopefully one good egg from mom and one good sperm from dad, and that creates your genes, and hopefully that creates the house of your body, and the blueprint of your body is a good one, and you're just subject to having good genes or bad genes. We know that it's just not the case. I mean, I remember back when I was a biology student at UC San Diego, that then, and this was in the early 90s, they were teaching genetics-wise that 50% of your health was determined by your genes. And that meant 50%, meaning diet, exercise, stress, influences controlled the other 50% of your health. Now, Dr. Lipton's work and diving into epigenetics, some people are saying, and Dr. Lipton is one, that only 2% of your health is determined by your genes, that it's actually the environment that you're in, be it the foods you eat or the way you're using your body or the stresses you're subjected to and the thought patterns that you have, and whether you're positive or negative or you're in an environment that's positive or negative, that's really the determinant of your health. So if we take it back to pregnancy, the 9 months that your baby's body is being formed and their brain is being formed is being influenced by your internal environment, meaning the foods that you're eating and the way you're moving your body. But a lot of it has to do, even more so, with the stress that you're under and the way that you're handling that stress. Now, the way he explains it makes perfect sense, is that if, in a stress sense, if you yourself are going through your day and you have a stressful event happen, so we'll just say an immediate stress that happens, you have that adrenaline rush and that stress response. When those stress hormones course throughout your body, it puts you in a fight or flight state. And in a fight or flight state, what happens is your blood is shunted away from your internal organs, because digestion and detoxing and stuff, that is not important, because you want the blood going to your arms and legs to be able to fight the saber-toothed tiger that's in front of you or run away. You want to have it in your extremities, your arms and legs, to be able to survive the moment. And assuming you do survive the moment, then things will balance out and blood flow will go back to normal. But also neurologically, when that stress reaction happens, the frontal cortex, the areas of reason, of empathy, of compassion, of logic get turned off, because neurologically what fires is your hindbrain, that reptilian brain, that primitive brain that is reactive and just trying to figure out, all right, can I run away and survive, or do I have to stay and fight and hopefully survive the fight with the saber-toothed tiger? So if a mom is so before that, if that's what's going through your own body, we know that these stress hormones cross the placenta and affect your baby. And those hormones go into your baby, and your baby has the same kind of stress response. That blood is shunted away from the internal organs and go to the arms and legs, and their neurology, the brain development, is altered in that the frontal cortex isn't getting as much firing as the reptilian brain, that reactive brain. So what does that mean? So what he described in a stress reaction, or moms that were subjected to chronic levels of stress throughout the pregnancy, their babies, one, tended to be of higher birth weights, and that's because the blood shunting away from the internal organs to the arms and legs made those arms and legs more developed, and the muscular development was there, so they tended to be bigger, heavier babies. But they also had a lot more digestive problems because the GI system, the stomach and the elimination, all those things weren't as developed because the blood was being shunted away from them. He also described that these babies tended to be much more irritable and fussy because their brain was being wired into this, the world is stressful because mom's experiencing this on a day-to-day level, so the world must be stressful. So their brains basically being prepared for that. So they're locked in a fight or flight state, and they're much more hypersensitive to temperature. They're much more hypersensitive to light, to sound, harder to soothe because they're just wired thinking there's saber-toothed tigers all around. Now, Mama Bear is around and Papa Bear is around to protect them, but their neurology and their physiology is wired towards stress. And that's going to make the baby just that much more harder to soothe and calm. And we don't want that for our kiddos, right? Not at all. So this is all exemplified even further in a study that's called the Rotman Study. Now, the Rotman Study is a psychological study based on these kind of stress factors, but it shows how the attitude of mom shapes the physical growth and development of the baby. And so what they did in this study was they took all these different moms and they controlled for, age and socioeconomic factors and all those kind of normal things. But what they separated them out into 4 different groups solely based on the attitude of the mom towards the pregnancy and becoming a mom. So on the 2 ends of the spectrum were the obvious ones. There were the happy moms, the ones that were really excited to be pregnant. They were excited to be parents and couldn't wait to meet baby on the other side. Those were called ideal moms. And on the other end of the spectrum were women that were unhappy about being pregnant. And because of either cultural reasons or familial reasons or religious reasons, they were, quote, keeping the baby, but they weren't happy about it. In between were 2 other groups that attitude-wise were slightly different. There was one, they were called the cool moms. The cool moms were ones that basically they were happy on the inside, and the psychologists designing the study determined that unconsciously they were happy about being pregnant, but outwardly they'd express doubt, kind of downplay things, and there was a conflict where the moms were outwardly being one way and inwardly another. The other group was called the ambivalent group, and they, on a day-to-day basis, were kind of on polar ends of things, that sometimes they were really excited about being pregnant, and other days they were really fearful and doubtful about either becoming a parent and whether they can pull it off, or the circumstances that we're being born into, whether it's issues with the father or with money, whatever it might be. And I'm sure you listening to this, you could fall into any one of those groups given any moment about like, oh my gosh, I'm super happy, or oh my gosh, I'm scared. All those things are normal as far as the pregnancy is concerned. But these women were separated into these groups based on the dominance of one of those traits. So that other group that was called the ambivalent group was different from the cool group because they were all over the board and there was a lot more flux of things, versus the cool group was, even though internally they were happy, externally they were expressing doubt. So those are those 4 groups. And what they ended up doing was, after the pregnancy, they looked at the health and well-being of the child, of the baby, 3 months afterwards. So they were determining the psychological attitude of the mom during the pregnancy, and then assessed 3 months after the birth, the health and well-being of the baby. And this is what they found. So on the 2 ends of the spectrum, kind of what you would expect. Happy moms had happy babies. Kind of sounds like the name of this podcast, right? That those babies were well adjusted, they were eating well, they were breastfeeding well, they were gaining weight, they were sleeping well, all that kind of happy, healthy stuff that you would expect. And on the other end of the spectrum, as you would expect, the ones that weren't excited about being moms and were kind of negative about it, those kiddos were having a lot more problems like failure to thrive. They weren't breastfeeding well. There was a lot of fussiness, irritability and mom wasn't able to soothe them, nor were they really all that engaged in even wanting to soothe them. So unhappy mom, unhappy baby. So the middle 2 groups, though, is really interesting in that the middle group, say the cool moms, those are the ones that internally were or subconsciously were happy and externally were kind of downplaying things. These babies were labeled as lethargic babies, that they really slept a lot, which is what kind of all parents would want out of their newborns, but they were really disengaged in that they were really brought up in an environment in utero of being discounted, and they showed up physiologically as being lethargic and not really connecting with mom nor with the environment. They're just kind of shut down because of the cool attitude that the mom had during the pregnancy. And in the ambivalent group, those are the ones that were like, depending on the day or the hour, moms were feeling happy or feeling doubtful of things. These babies tended to have a lot of GI problems. And this goes back to what I was talking about with the fight or flight response. It was that flux of the attitude that reflected in a flux on a wide change of the hormones that was coursing through her body, that was then going through the placenta and affecting the baby, that was causing a stressful response to the baby because you didn't know which way was up, and produced that effect of the GI system not getting the blood flow to properly develop. And so they were having a lot more colic, or what they were calling at that time colic, gassiness, fussiness, inability to digest well. And it was postulated that it was because of this attitude was the only thing that was different within these groups, that it was because of that stress that went into the pregnancy, went into the baby, and produced that physiological change, which I just think that's fascinating. That shows that not only just that stress response that we were talking about with Dr. Lipton, and that makes sense that if your body's continually subjected to cortisol and adrenaline, that the baby is going to be prepared for stress. But now attitude and the thoughts that you're thinking and the attitude specifically towards the baby hears and the baby senses. And the baby reacts to and is developed and marinated in that, and then it affects their health and well-being afterwards. So it's, in a big picture sense, I love this quote from Dr. Thomas Verney. He's the other co-founder of APPPAH. And he's talking about the big picture sense of bringing babies into the world peacefully and easily, and how it really can change the world. He says, world ecology has to start with womb ecology. We cannot have peace and good people in the world without raising peaceful, good children. And that has to start at conception, not at birth, but at conception. And that goes to what we were just talking about, that if the internal environment that is your body is the baby's external environment that is preparing them for the world, then if your internal environment is stressed, then the baby's going to be intelligently prepared for a stressful world. And that means body changes, neurological changes, and psychological changes. But then if your internal environment is peaceful and happy and nurturing, as all parents want to do, your baby's going to be the same way. And so it's with these prenatal bonding techniques that can create that kind of environment and give you all those results in the Raffai study that I talked about having not only a better birth with less medical intervention because you were more connected with your baby, but those babies then were nurtured in that kind of environment and marinated in that peaceful environment and loving environment. So they were sleeping better. They weren't crying as much. Moms were feeling more confident as a parent and being able to soothe them, that those first 3 months and beyond were going to be that much easier because of the connection. I mean, think about that. If you're a first-time parent, those first 3 months, I've talked about this before, can be really hard. There's so many things you don't know. There's cues that your baby's giving you that you don't know, and it can be frustrating, and you're trying to learn, but you're sleep-deprived, and your hormones are trying to balance themselves, and you're trying to heal from 9 months of pregnancy as well as the birth, and it can just be really tough. But if you are connected with your baby and you're feeling really connected, then those stressful times of baby not being able to calm down, or you not being able to figure it out, or you're just being frustrated because it seems overwhelming, you're going to be able to get through those times that much easier because of the bond. I mean, think of it with your partner. Like, hopefully you have a great bond with your partner, that if you go through a stressful time together, if you and your partner have a really healthy bond and a strong bond, and you have that team environment and that team feel, you can get through anything. And you know that even though it gets stressful, like, you got each other's backs, and it's going to be easier to get through that than if you don't feel supported, you don't feel connected, and that stress can be heightened because it's going to stress a weaker bond, and you might be feeling like it's going to break. So as far as our kiddos are concerned, there's simple techniques that you can do on a daily basis to strengthen that bond. Now, that bond's always there, right? I mean, the mother-child bond is 100% there all the time. We just want to clarify and strengthen it with these practices. And I'm going to go and share a couple of them right now. You can get a free guide that I put out together called the 40 Ways to Connect with Your Baby During Pregnancy. It's an ebook that I put together with 40 different exercises that you can do. You can get it on my website at drjwarren.com/40ways, 40 ways, WAYS. And you just enter your email and it'll email it to you right away. One of the ones that I love the most that I teach my patients here in the office is follow the leader. And that's something that maybe instinctively you're doing if your baby's big enough where you're feeling kicks and punches and all that kind of stuff. Then when baby kicks you hard, you might pat your tummy there where they kicked you and maybe even say out loud, like, whoa, like, baby's really kicking. But if you were to even change that wording into like, whoa, okay, I feel you. I feel that kick. I hear you. I'm with you. I understand you're wanting to say hello, but do it gentler. You can have that kind of conversation with them. So you might be instinctually doing that patting, but what you can do in a follow the leader sense is if baby's going through a particular kicking time or squirming time, and you're patting them on those times where you feel them pushing out on your belly, then you can quickly, after you've patted them where they punched you or kicked you, you can go to the other side of the belly and pat your tummy there and see if they pat you back. Now, I've taught this to tons of women in my practice over the last couple of years, and it does take some time, but it's really fun because baby starts patting back on the opposite side. So it's almost like a game, right? Follow the leader is a game, but you can do it there of connecting and through sensory touch, them sensing you patting as well as you sensing them patting or punching in that case. it's a really, really great bonding practice that you can do. And dads can do it too, right? There's even an anecdotal story around hearing and touch around a dad that his kind of way of coming into the house at the end of the day was he'd walk through the door and he'd say, "Hi, honey, like, good to see you," and give her a hug and a kiss. But then he'd go immediately down to mama's belly and say, like, "Hi, baby, daddy's home." And after a while, when the baby got a little bigger in the pregnancy, he noticed that when he went down there to the belly and said that, baby would kick out at him, kind of saying hi back through his punch. And he just thought that was hilarious. So what he ended up doing was going down to the belly again and saying, like, "Hi, baby, daddy's home," and waiting for that punch to, like, kick him in the face there. And he'd immediately go to the opposite side of the baby and say, like, "Hey, baby, I'm over here." And then boom, pretty soon after a couple of days, baby was reacting and kicking out and saying hi in that way. So that's another really fun way that you can connect with your baby there. Another great way to connect is through singing. And this is something that came to me, or I learned through a couple of guests on the podcast that if you haven't listened to those episodes, it was with Dr. Michelle O'Donnell and Penny Simpkin. And usually in my podcasting life, I do an interview a week. It's rare that I do 2 interviews in 1 week. I like to space them out more with my practice and my family life and everything. I can get bottlenecked sometimes, but back at this time, I interviewed both Michelle O'Donnell and Penny Simpkin on the same day. And as you know, if you've listened to the podcast, one of the last question I ask our guests is, what words of wisdom or message would you like to whisper into the little ear of a baby that might be listening through mama's belly right now? And both of them said, I wouldn't say anything. I would sing to them. They both said the same thing, that singing was something that they really encouraged moms to do. And I was really blown away that they both said that very uniquely, but they both said it at the same time. So it wasn't that unique, but on the same day. And so what I like to teach you here is to sing lullabies now to your baby during the pregnancy, because you're going to be singing, hopefully, you're going to be singing a lot to your baby to help them soothe and wind down and have it be part of the bedtime routine. And if going back to the Cat in the Hat book, we know that baby can recognize that book and have a memory of the book, then if you start singing a lullaby to them now, they're going to remember that lullaby. And if you're singing that song to them in a peaceful environment at the end of the day, it's just kind of like your own wind down and saying hi and connecting to your baby before you fall asleep, then that's going to cue them into that relaxed environment. They're going to remember your voice. They're going to remember that melody, and that'll cue them for a relaxing time as well as to a sleep time. And this is something I didn't know to do, and I didn't do during Nico's pregnancy, but very soon after he was born, I was singing a lot to him to try and help him calm down for nap time or for bedtime. And I'm the type of person that when I like a song, I kind of run it in the ground and I listen to it over and over and over again. And at the time, there was a Colin Hay song that I really liked. Colin Hay used to be the lead singer of the 80s band Men at Work. That kind of dates me of how old I am. But he's got a really cool kind of singer-songwriter vibe going, like acoustic guitar stuff, which is my favorite type of music. And in one of his songs, he has lines that were just really good for soothing a baby. I'm not going to sing it to you now, but it basically was just a really sweet message that when I was trying to bounce and calm him down came to me to sing. And so that became a song I sung to him a lot. And now fast forward, Nico's 4.5, and there's times where he just isn't winding down for bedtime, and I'm laying in bed with him trying to help him calm down, and I'll start singing to him. And there's times where he's so wound up and I start singing this Colin Hay song that he says, "No, Daddy, like, I'm not tired. I'm not going to sleep. No, I don't want that song." So as frustrating as that might be, in that, I really want him to calm down, I want him to go to sleep, it it shows that he recognizes that as the song of calming down. And I noticed that way back when, even when he was like 3 months and 6 months, that if I could get that song going and he calmed down enough to like even hear it, he would soothe. He would definitely soothe. And so talking to baby, saying out loud messages of just encouraging things is going to be really important. That brings me to the message of welcome and wanted. That's a message that we want all of our babies to hear as much as possible. We want our kids hearing that when they're here in the world, but now in utero, that's something you can start right now. It's one of the main guided meditations, guided imagery portions of the Connecting with Baby program. And I joke in that course that, all right, if you guys don't do anything in this course at all, this module of this message of welcome and wanted, this is the one to do. Because the more you can say to baby how much you love them, how much how excited you are to meet them, how excited you are to be their mom, and that they chose you as their mom. That's absolutely my belief, that our kids choose us, and that you're going to do everything you can to be the best mom possible, and we're going to have great adventures together, and we're so excited, and I'm going to show you everything that I can, and we're just going to have a wonderful time together, and I love you and can't wait to meet you. Like messages like that, saying that out loud is best, but even if you're just thinking that and patting your belly and rubbing your belly while you're having those thoughts, it's going to create a biochemical environment in your nervous system that's going to pass on into the in utero environment that your baby's going to be marinating in. And what better environment for our kids to grow and develop in the pregnancy than that they are welcome, that they are wanted, that mom really cares about them, dad really cares about them, and the world's in a really exciting, beautiful place. It has its craziness and things that we're scared of, but mom and dad, we got your back. We're really excited to have you come into the world and be a part of our family, and to experience like all the wonders together, and to just love on each other. I mean, that is just a message that if you can do that just alone, will make a huge difference for our kiddos, because as the psychology has shown, there's 30 years of research in the field of pre and perinatal psychology that I've learned through the APPPAH, as I was talking about, is showing that babies are having that experiencing, the forming memories, they're listening, they're learning about the world, and they're really making decisions about the world. If the world that they're experiencing in utero is stressful, they're making decisions that the world outside is stressful, and they're going to participate in the world and go about their lives much different than if in utero they're constantly getting the messages and marinating in a biochemical experience of the world being safe, the world being loving, that they have loving parents that care and nurture for them already in the pregnancy, and that's only going to continue as they come into the world. I don't believe at all that the womb experience is a scary experience just because it's dark and things like that. I think the womb environment is an amazing environment. It's temperature controlled. It's food on demand. It's really gentle. It's buoyant. It's just stresses that you can that you're subjected to can alter that environment. And I don't want that to stress you out or guilt you in any way, but I want you to take heart at the end of this that, if you're having a stressful day, baby's having a stressful day. And so you might do things at the end of the day to unwind your tension, at least I hope you do, in a self-care sense. But if you communicate with baby and connect with them, like either during the stressful environment or right out, or stressful event or afterwards and say, whoa, all right, that was really stressful. I understand that. Like, it was stressful for me. This is what was happening, but now it's over. Everything's okay. This is what I'm going to be doing to unwind. I'm going to put my feet up. I'm going to have some good food. I'm going to relax, take a bath, whatever it might be. If you're consciously talking to your baby or acknowledging that their baby had stress too, then what you're teaching them is, one, self-care, and two, you're giving them a context for what that stress was. Because, yes, they're conscious, but they're not necessarily knowing exactly that altercation you had with a coworker, what that was all about. They just know they're experiencing stress. But we want them to experience the resolution of stress on the other side. We want them experiencing what it's like to come out of that stress. So instead of just chronically being pinned in a fight or flight sense, if there is an experience of stress, which is going to happen in pregnancy, that's just part of life. And we want them experiencing stress so they can be adaptable to it, but we want the babies being able to experience the resolution of it on the other side so that they know how to do that themselves. So again, in parenting our kids, like from conception rather than waiting until birth, you can start teaching them self-care, and you can start teaching them the resolution of stress and how to adapt to it that much better in utero and wire their nervous systems into doing that. And that's what we want for our kids, right? There's tons of stresses in the world. We just want them to be able to handle it and adapt to it. We're going to protect them as much as we can, but it's impossible to do that. So we want to be able to have them have the tools to be able to handle those things that come their way. And so if you're able to do this connecting processes, and again, I encourage you to get the 40 Ways Guide, or if you're inspired by this and you're pregnant now and you want to learn this even more so, to get the Connecting with Baby program. If you are able to do these things, you're going to start off your family life together that much more strong, that much more soothed, that much more relaxed, and you can get to the bonding part of things rather than needing to start off life or having to start off life in a stressful way with lots of sleepless nights and frustration. And there's tons of frustrations that come with parenting because it's a brand new gig, but the more you can be bonded, then you can have all those benefits that we talked about in the Raffai Study at the beginning of this episode, where babies are sleeping longer and deeper, that crying's decreased, postpartum depression is lessened. And well, I want that for all of you. That's why when I found out about these things, I dove deep into the subject matter. I've been studying it for the last couple of years and put together these processes in a format that's easy for you as a parent during your pregnancy to do. It only takes minutes a day. There's in the Connecting with Baby program, it has modules where it's teaching a bunch of the principles there, but largely the course is all about these MP3s that you can download and have on your phone or wherever you listen to things that are guided imageries to be able to do this connection process. Go through all the 40 ways that's in the ebook guide, but diving deeper into these other processes of being able to listen to baby and be able to teach baby things as well as deliver that message of welcome and wanted. And obviously, like as a dad, this is where I started as a dad doing these processes, and I put a module in for the dads and how they can connect, because I really want dads to be involved in this process as well, because it's really important for our kids to have both parents loving and engaged. And dads sometimes feel frustrated that, they can't really do it until baby comes around, but that's not true. They can do what I did, and I've learned even more that I've taught in that module as well. So if you're inspired, if you're interested in that, go to my website, which is drjwarren.com/CWB, which is Connecting with Baby. That'll send you to the page that you can learn more about the program. And I really recommend that you get the program. It makes a huge difference, and it's a fun way of going through the pregnancy week by week, day by day. A lot of the women that have the program and that I've taught these processes to in my practice here, just look forward to that as a really fun part of their day to do, whether it's to wind down at the end of the day or to start off the day in a connected way with baby and to really participate in a whole new way. So That's what's possible. Again, you can go to my website /40 ways for the ebook, or go to my website /CWB. That's to get directly to the program. And I'll have those links in the show notes, so you can just click right on over. And I hope to help you with those processes. Reach out to me if you have any questions about it, either through my website, or you can always email me, and I'll be happy to answer those questions. So until next time, be well, and you're doing a great job as a parent. You're not alone in it, and there's lots of help available for you. Take care.